A warehouse might seem fairly straightforward, but it's much more than just four walls and a roof. In fact, warehouses serve a very important role in the world economy, the global supply chain, and ultimately in getting things from the factory floor to your front door. So in this video, I'm going to explain some of the key components of a functional warehouse. Not only will these elements make you more knowledgeable, but if you're involved in the industry in any capacity, this could also help you avoid making a costly mistake. Now, the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that before any work can be done in the warehouse itself, products need to get to and from the building in the first place. To address this, we need to consider what types of vehicles will come and go from the property and how products will move back and forth from the vehicles to the warehouse. This might include small delivery vans, cube vans, or most commonly, at least for larger buildings, semi-tractor trailers. The trailers themselves can be up to 53 feet long, and when combined with trucks, these big rigs can approach 73 feet in total length. Naturally, the longer the vehicle, the more space will be required to maneuver, and something we'll soon explore is that not all buildings are compatible for longer vehicles. This leads to the first point. A warehouse is only as functional as the receiving and delivery allows it to be. This may sound obvious at the first take, but let me show you an example so you can see how the amount of loading space sets the literal parameters for what type of vehicles can access the building. And while I do that, I want to show you two free tools you can use which are very helpful. Okay, so the first tool I want to show you is Google Earth Studio. And if you just type in Google Earth Studio into your browser and go to it, you do need to apply to get an account, but everybody that I know that has applied for one has been granted one. So as long as you have a Gmail account, you should be able to get this. And this is just really cool at how quickly you can create an awesome 3D video map. So I'll show you a quick way of doing this. If we just go File, New, Fly to an Orbit, type in the address. I'm going to type in an address for a property that I owned, which I don't own anymore, but it's a good representation of a property with a very tight loading area. So there's some learning curve to this, but you can pick this up very quickly, especially if you just wanted to do the basics. But I'll leave a tutorial for a guy who did an awesome job explaining just how functional and impressive this program is. But when you come to here, you could see some of the things that we can set. We can set the angle that it comes in at, where it starts, how low it actually goes. And the one that we put on here is it zooms in and then does an orbit of the property. And then you can play with all these functions in here as well. And then when you render it, I'm just going to render it as the address. You can actually render it in the cloud. And it'll email it to you when it's finished. And I'll just put up real quickly what this looks like when it's done. As you can tell, this particular building is more conducive for smaller delivery vehicles, such as a small truck or cube van. So you can immediately see the challenges presented if the tenant expects to have larger vehicles coming and going. To be fair, people are quite creative when posed with situations like these. I've seen a number of companies try to work around these issues by pulling in the truck perpendicular to the loading door and loading and unloading via a forklift. This might work in situations where large vehicle deliveries are rather infrequent, but it can undoubtedly cause major issues for other tenants in the building. The next thing that I want to show you as a cool tool is if you go to Google. So let's just open a new window here. Let's go to the address again. Go to the maps, click on the map. If you come down to this map area right here, you can actually get a pretty good idea of the using the measure tool right on the function that's on here. So I'll actually show you how cool this can actually be. So if we come up, this is the building here, and you can, there's actually a little fence right here, which might be a little bit hard to see. But if you come to the end of the building, right click, go down to the measure distance, and then go to where the end of the yard space is, you can actually see how long that distance is. And you can see in this particular one, it's about 45 feet. You could see why this property just isn't ideal for bringing in any type of larger vehicles. So this leads to the question, is there an optimal number? As it turns out, there is. And that number, according to HPA Architects, one of the leaders in warehouse design and architecture, they've calculated that 131 feet between the loading door and the end of the yard space provides enough yard area for the largest legal vehicles to have room to conduct a single swing, even if there are other vehicles parked on either side. Now, instead of 131 being the most common number, we'll typically see either 130 feet or 135 feet. Let's check out the Los Angeles area, and I'll search for just a generic distribution center so we can see how this works. And if we look at this property right here, you could see the loading with the trucks in here, and there's a little grass boulevard right here. So again, if we go and click on the end of the building, click measure distance, go to where the yard ends, and you could see that that's like right in that 132 foot range. And if we were pinpoint accurate, that could either be 130 or 135, but that is a pretty common number on there. Note that this is an optimal number for yard depth, and there are certainly scenarios where a building with less depth can still accommodate large vehicles. If there aren't any trailers or tractor trailers parked adjacent to the stall, a truck that's backing into it needs less room. How much less is debatable, but just be aware that the smaller it gets, the more challenging it becomes. Maybe driverless vehicles in the future will narrow this down to a fine art, but in the meantime, we should all be thankful for the hard work of truck drivers and the difficult job they have backing into stalls. Another scenario we can address is when two buildings have the doors facing each other, which is quite common as it can allow for smaller overall area for maneuvering. Instead of two separate buildings requiring 131 feet each, the optimal number for a shared yard area is 204 feet. Again, this area can be less than that in certain circumstances, but just be aware that the smaller it gets, the more difficult it becomes to maneuver. This leads to the next point about yard management. Will companies that occupy the building plan on storing trailers on site? If not, where will those trailers go? If it's right across from the loading area, there'll need to be some additional yard space. Or if it's beside the building, then there'll need to be some additional land there. Having additional yard space might not be as much of a concern for single-occupant buildings where there isn't expected to be much storage required, but for buildings with multiple tenants, any clog up in the trailers can affect everybody. Large-scale developments will typically involve a sophisticated team of architects, engineers, planners, consultants, and also, of course, the knowledge and experience of the developers. As a result, you're not likely to encounter many functional issues with new, modern buildings. But challenges may arise when you're dealing with older product or inexperienced developers. And this happens more often than people might realize, particularly since properties located closer to downtown cores or older, more established neighborhoods tend to be that older industrial stock. So for all these companies looking for that last mile delivery, this is something to be very cognizant about. This leads to one of the key trade-offs in warehouse design and construction. There's a delicate balance between functionality and economics. If money was no object, a building could have virtually unlimited loading area and storage for trailers. If functionality wasn't a concern, the building would have minimal loading area and no additional yard whatsoever. Once we've identified the type of vehicles coming back and forth, we can then look at a few other important areas. First, determine whether the yard area is paved with concrete or asphalt. There are a number of variables that get factored in here, such as climate, paving costs, maintenance, to name a few. As a general rule of thumb, I'd look to see what is most commonly used in your area. If every other property has asphalt, then there's probably a good reason for it. You can also talk to local paving companies or general contractors to get their opinions on it as well. Now that we've covered the yard area, let's move to the exterior of the building and talk about the loading. If getting vehicles to the building is the first major consideration, then how the product gets inside the building is the next logical factor to consider. Most large warehouses will have dozens, if not hundreds, of dock-level loading doors. These doors are typically 48 inches off the ground and are 8 feet wide by 9 feet high. That's what a dock door essentially is. It's located at roughly the same height as the bed of a truck so that product can quickly and efficiently be loaded and unloaded. Some companies may want a certain number of doors all located in a row, while other companies may want loading on both sides of the building. We'll talk more about why there can be a difference in the next video, but just be aware that the amount and configurations of the door is critical. Next, determine if there's a need for grade level loading in addition to the dock loading. Companies may need to bring in larger items into the building, or they may just want to have the ability to drive something directly inside. An existing dock door can theoretically be retrofitted with a ramp, but keep in mind that the size of the door may need to be increased as well. This is not to also mention any engineering or cost restrictions that might prohibit that. Putting all this into context, a large company will choose a building that meets all of their requirements. They'll want adequate access for all their vehicles, they'll want ample yard space to store all the trailers, they'll have numerous dot doors and likely a few grade level doors as well. Where this starts getting more difficult is when you have a tenant that needs a smaller space or if you have a building that wasn't built to these modern standards. This is where you either need to be creative or start accepting that there might need to be some trade-offs. This can come in the form of tighter loading areas or the inability to have grade loading or on-site trailer storage. So as strange as it may sound, leasing a 20,000 square foot space might be more challenging than leasing a 2 million square foot space. That's a broad statement to make, of course, but it does underscore just how diverse the industrial real estate industry really is. Looking at this from a high-level view, both figuratively and literally, shows how this all makes sense. Vehicles need adequate room to maneuver to the building, and there needs to be an efficient way of getting product to and from the warehouse to the vehicles. When you factor in where the vehicles or trailers can park and the best construction materials to use for the yard, you can understand why this is all so important. Join in for the next video where I break down some key elements of the inside of the warehouse as well. And as you might have guessed, it's also much more complex than just being a place to store product. Thanks for watching, catch you in the next video.
I thought I'm supposed to hold it.
It's not even in focus, so.
Okay, then we need it back here.
See how the amount of loading space sets the lineal shows how all this, scroll up just a little bit, I was doing so well, I was on a roll. Got that one.
Again?
Yeah. Not the whole way, just.
Okay, not the whole way?
And the regular general, huge scroll up.
Huge.
Well, we should have a lot of bloopers to use for that one. Like that whole video could have almost been bloopers.
Yeah.